Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I wanted to get up quick because she was just going to keep going. I think that was a very, very kind and generous introduction, Nina. Thank you. Minister, it was great to hear, wherever he is, I think he's gone. He ran away. It was great to hear his words, of course, which I hit home for someone like myself, a young entrepreneur, that can certainly use the support of our government and its policies. And congratulations to the TiEQuest organizers and president. Very, very well organized event. So I've got a few minutes to talk to you, and then I really hope that you engage me with some interesting questions. No question is unfair game, so please let at it. My parents always like to say that I was born an entrepreneur. My mom loves to recite this story that when I was a kid, she forbid me from climbing over the fence into my neighbor's yard where one of my friends lived. And so I concluded that the best solution was to dig a tunnel under the fence. And I thought that was a great solution. For an industrious little 6-year-old, that was a great solution. She was not impressed, of course, when she found me under the fence. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I was thinking ahead. And I suppose when I look back, there are countless tales of concocting solutions, to childhood dilemmas, and finding interesting ways to make money, and ideally make that money make money. By the time I got to university, my mind was pretty well made up that I wasn't going to fit into a 9-to-5 job very well, or into any kind of bureaucratic structure. By the third year of university, I was flying to Los Angeles regularly, building websites during the dot-com boom for the early days of the World Wide Web. In my fourth year of engineering, I was building a website for a company called ClearNet, which was a startup wireless company in Canada in the late 90s that some of you may remember. And when I got to know the guys at ClearNet, some of them used to work at Bell at that time, and I guess in our industry, everyone worked at Bell at some point. I met them and noticed, learning about the industry from them, I noticed a real opportunity in Canada as the local phone market was being deregulated in 1998. Within a few months of that, I managed to convince a crew of my fellow engineering colleagues to launch my first telecom business out of my university apartment. That was 13 years ago. And I bet scanning this room, there's stories just like mine here, and the world is littered with tales of entrepreneurs who launched from their university dorm rooms. Unfortunately, most of those dorm rooms are housed seemingly in the US at Stanford or Harvard or MIT. Across the border, where entrepreneurship isn't met with a raised eyebrow like, is that a real job? Canadians have not historically been raised in a school system or culture that embraces or provides roadmaps for budding entrepreneurs. Take the math or science route to become a banker, a doctor, or an engineer. Take the English lit route to become a writer. Take political sciences to become a lawyer. Or take drama to pursue a passion in the arts. In my opinion, only recently, very recently, have high schools started to embrace the possibility that entrepreneurship is actually a viable option for young Canadians. It's because of the success being achieved by an entire crop of Canadian entrepreneurs like yourselves that future generations will consider entrepreneurship among the host of a more conventional career choice. So how did it come to be that a kid from rural Ontario started a telecom company in his university apartment, and today winds up going head-to-head with the three of the most powerful companies in Canada? I've been asked that question many times, and there's really no miracles or rocket science. It really is just stubborn, relentless determination and hard work. I obviously am a risk taker, and I'm a big, big believer in Canada and that Canada can do much better. So I'm here to share my story of entrepreneurship, how I've faced some pretty unprecedented regulatory and legal challenges in launching Wind Mobile, but I'm also happy to share the whole story of Globalive. How I started a company called Globalive with no capital in 1998 to compete in just niche markets that the big guys were ignoring. Grew that company to over 100 million in annual sales fairly quickly, always strategically leveraging our cash flows and reinvesting in our business. How we built more recently a brand called Win Mobile to compete in a crowded market and emerge as Canada's 4th national wireless carrier, ready to challenge the status quo and demand the changes necessary in the sector to compete, for Canada to compete on a global scale. In 2006, the same year the Telecom Review Panel reported that we needed a world-class telecom industry in order to enhance Canada's competitiveness in global markets, I was running Globalive. We'd been building the business up for 10 years at that point in a relatively quiet way, very low profile, finding our opportunities in these niche markets that the big guys didn't care that much about. Those niches led to a reasonable sized, profitable business that enjoyed a very nice growth trajectory. However, I knew that in order for us to take that giant leap from small to mid-sized business to become a national, ultimately international business, where my aspirations lie, I had to begin to compete with the incumbents here in Canada more than in just niche markets. I had to start going after their core businesses. So at the same time I was considering our next move, the government was facing a lot of heat about wireless in Canada, and for good reason. Is there any Win customers in the room? Thank you for your business. Thank you for your support. The average mobile wireless customer in Canada was paying, at that time, 07, 08, more than 2.2 times the average in the US. Canadians had access to far fewer brands and choices than in other nations, and our penetration rate was sitting at 67% compared to over 89% in the US at the time and over 100% already in Europe, and most of Europe at the time. In fact, our penetration rate was so low that our country was actually ranked 30th of 30 countries in the OECD, last, dead last. So customers, also known as voters, were getting increasingly vocal about how the pay more, get less philosophy had permeated throughout the Canadian wireless sector. To say that there was a lot of pent-up angst and hostility towards the incumbents would be a huge understatement. So it was both the public outcry for more wireless competition and the Telecom Review Panel report that helped facilitate the federal government's decision to ultimately open the wireless industry and spectrum auction to new entrants in 2007. And with that, the door I was looking for to compete with the Canadian incumbents in their core business had opened. And we took our first step into the wireless world. But competing in an auction of that scale would ultimately require more capital than we could shore up on Canadian soil. And believe me, we tried. We knew that in order to purchase enough spectrum to compete nationally, we'd have to find a partner and investor with substantial scale, operating experience, staying power, and a long-term horizon in order to build a viable competitor to the incumbents and regional operators. We searched around the world for a strategic investor and ultimately secured a partnership with Weather Investments company called Orascom Telecom. At the time, the largest mobile operator in emerging markets with over 125 million subscribers. At the time, over 6 times larger than all the Canadian carriers combined. So with Orascom secured as our partner, we participated in the auction and won close to $500 million of spectrum. And at that time, we were anointed the new hope for choice in Canadian wireless. But while competition was the desired outcome, in the end, out of the auction, what emerged actually was a herd of new players that would all try to battle to become Canada's 4th national carrier. So a landscape that was once dominated by 3 wireless companies quickly gave way to a new landscape, one of old establishment, the big 3, and a host of new rookie players with no less than 6 new companies entering the market or with plans to enter the market. Our biggest challenge at that point became, how do we differentiate ourselves from all these other new players? How would we stand out without just competing on price? Of course, we knew that a price war would erode the market opportunity considerably, and ultimately new features and benefits would all catch up from all the new providers. and we would look virtually the same as the rest of them. So at that time, we took a different tact. Besides a lack of penetration, the Canadian wireless industry is known for another trend that I alluded to earlier: continued and sustained customer dissatisfaction. I guess you had a bad experience with one of the big three. Me too. Not an irrelevant consideration. Wireless and telephone companies have consistently topped the list for consumer complaints. 60% of Canadians were frustrated with their current providers, sick of paying double what Americans pay, tired of being locked in endless contracts and nonsensical fees, and incensed with the lack of customer service from the big guys. The incumbents, in fact, were doing such a good job of doing such a bad job of customer service that the market seemed ripe for a player that could capitalize on the dissatisfaction by offering a remarkable alternative. So at that time, we started talking, what if we chose customer service or customer satisfaction as our calling card? Could that become our differentiator? Could we harness the mass, widespread dissatisfaction and turn it into a competitive advantage? Brands like Apple, Avis, Staples, Disney, here in Canada, WestJet, have all laid a big stake in the customer experience and customer service ground. It seemed to us that the incumbents had opened a door, and if we were nimble, and if we were quicker than the other new entrants, we could claim a big piece of that customer service territory. This became our first major decision in building the brand and creating a competitive advantage. So before the name WIND was ever uttered, before we talked about a price, a plan, or a product, we launched something called the Wireless Soapbox. We became the first would-be new entrant to host an online forum for the sole purpose of dialoguing with Canadians about the good, the bad, and the ugly in Canadian wireless. Before we ever floated the idea of what WIND would offer, we asked Canadians what they wanted. A novel idea in a category that's very much used to talking at customers instead of with them. So essentially, we made our first partners in our business our customers. It also, in the age of 24/7 media consumption, with Facebook and Twitter and blogs and forums, this became our single most important communication tool. Unanticipated, but that's the way it happened. It made us relevant and anticipated. Two key ingredients when launching among several new players. Most importantly, it made us distinctly different and likable, something that hadn't been very apparent in Canadian wireless for a very, very long time. And I think it made us real. While customers could envision incumbent CEOs, counting the billfolds in the ivory towers, our executive team was online, on the blogs, on the forums, engaging Canadians in a dialogue, engaging in dialogue on Wireless Soapbox about what Canadians wanted to see in wireless. Our online engagement resulted in hundreds of thousands of views and posts and a great dialogue with Canadians, all months before we could sell a single thing. But while we built and created a community and rallied Canadians around a new idea for wireless in this country, the big guys, the incumbents, actively lobbied our regulatory bodies to investigate something called our Canadianness. And slowly, what started as a murmur became a firestorm of activity surrounding one crucial question. Was Globalive, with its Orascom partnership, Canadian enough to become Canada's fourth national wireless provider? And so in September of 2009, with the financing in place, the brand developed, the community engaged, the spectrum purchased, the licenses granted, the network being built, and a team of over 700 people hired, and the whole team ready to launch, we ran into a minor snag. At the urging of the incumbents, the CRTC created an unprecedented process that led to a highly subjective finding that Globalive was controlled by Orascom Telecom, our partner and foreign investor. We profoundly disagreed with this assessment, but the process and the decision the CRTC made to deny our entry put our entire company and the future of choice in wireless in Canada at great risk. And I won't lie, and I get asked about this all the time, those were like scary moments. It was not like we knew the answers. But an interesting thing happened during those uncertain regulatory days. Instead of fleeing, our investors stood fast in their support. Instead of flocking to another new entrant, our online community rallied behind us and actively supported us with the CRTC and the government. And instead of quitting to go work for the people that actually opposed our entry, our employees by the hundreds took to the streets in something we called random acts of kindness in support of charities. And all those weeks, in my view, were a true test and, in retrospect, a testament to the level of loyalty we had generated in such a short period of time. And I would argue that brand loyalty may very well be the ultimate deciding factor in between short-term success and our long-term viability. Throughout the uncertainty around our launch, we fought back publicly about simple truths about the need for competition in Canada and made the undisputable argument that we fit very comfortably within the existing rules, standards, and laws of Canada. After all, we had invested a great deal of money and time and effort on that conviction. Our economic future and global competitiveness depends on our ability to cultivate our entrepreneurial spirit. I honestly believe that future Canadian prosperity is tied to the success of our entrepreneurs and their startups. Small and medium-sized businesses represent over 99% of all firms in Canada, 48% of the total labor force in the private sector, and over 30% of all new jobs. And in an era of persistently stagnant job growth, cultivating successful startups is essential to creating significant and meaningful jobs. And most importantly, who's to say that the next billion-dollar idea, multi-billion-dollar idea, isn't being created in a Canadian dorm room somewhere right now? I'd like to believe that it's happening, and I'd like to believe that our example as entrepreneurs is making it possible for young Canadians to grow up in a country that embraces ideation and innovation and is primed to showcase it on the world stage. Thank you.